UFC 295 is in the works in a couple of days in Madison Square Garden. Little bit of an upheaval on the card. Obviously, it was set to be headlined by Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. Of course, the news broke that Jones did get injured. That fight is off. Stipe is off the card. Sergei Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall is now your co-main event for the interim title, but your new main event is the barn burner in the 205-pound division. Jiri Prochazka, Alex Pereira. Woo, that's a great fight as well to get us kicked off. Harry, before we get into it, I won't kind of spend too much time on this, but your initial thoughts on Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic fight being off this card?
Look, I think that as a contest, it's obviously one that we've all wanted to see for a long, long time. But I go back to, again, Shawnee's comments, which is we want to see the best fighters fight the best when they are the best. Is Stipe at 473 years old the best he's ever been? No, I don't think he is. Like, is Jon Jones the best? Maybe. But is he the 23-year-old Jon Jones? No, I don't think he is. Like, and so with the replacement, and obviously we'll get to the replacement, but personally, I think it's a breath of fresh air, this replacement fight. One of the things that you get with Jon Jones, especially in the latter stages of his career, are lots of contract negotiations, or lots of stalling, or lots of excuses, or lots of reasons why fights don't happen, whether legitimate or otherwise. And Stipe just doesn't seem like he wants to fight anymore. And I think he's been relatively open with that. He said he wants to fight Jon Jones because it does things for his legacy, but he has no interest in fighting a Sergei Pavlovich or a Tom Aspinall or a whoever it is you want to place into that bracket. And so we have, for a title, two of, if not the two, best prospects, best up-and-comers in this division. And for me, I think that's a wonderful thing to have. Obviously, as a fan, I wouldn't have turned down seeing Jon Jones and Stipe, but I'm also not that sad that I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, like I'm kind of the same myself. Look, all of Jon Jones's work inside the cage is something that I really enjoyed watching coming up, and anytime he fights I get sentimental in that kind of way of thinking with Jon Jones, based off just seeing his full career trajectory and what he's been able to do, one of a kind inside the octagon. But when the news broke about this fight and the fight being off, I mean, I've heard fights being cancelled before where it's like almost having the heart ripped out of your chest in certain terms, in the fact that, you know, oh my God, like you feel like you're missing an arm or a leg for the rest of the day after losing something that you've been so looking forward to. I was more so looking forward to seeing Jon Jones compete rather than the fight itself, because look, we possibly will get to talk about it again. I think, you know, Jones wouldn't have had it as easy as he did against Cyril Gane, but I think he still would have got the job done once he figured out Stipe pretty much early days. And that's how I would have saw that fight going. But what we have in its replacement is a fight between probably the two most legit contenders after Jon Jones and Stipe, which was basically a retirement fight for both, really, you know, this heavyweight fight. So we're getting to see the true next #1 contender / interim champion in the Pavlovich and Aspinall. We'll talk about that fight in just a minute. But look, I think Jon Jones not being on this card, you know, he'll be missed. The UFC will certainly miss him in terms of pay-per-view buys, etc. I think they'll miss him in the fact that he was probably going to sell a bunch more tickets at Madison Square Garden and stuff like that. So from the business side of things, I think the UFC will be massively disappointed in Jon Jones's exit. But no, I have to somewhat agree with you from a competitive and exciting point of view. You know, in certain terms, Pavlovich versus Aspinall is almost more exciting than Jon Jones and Stipe. So we'll talk, like I said, we'll talk about that in just a few moments. What we will get straight into, Harry, is the actual main event on the card. And that's a fight between former champion Jiri Prochazka and Alex Pereira, who are fighting for the seemingly always vacant light heavyweight title of the world in the UFC. Prochazka coming back off that big shoulder injury. Alex Pereira, after taking the middleweight title, will look to become a double weight world champion inside the UFC, like what he did at Glory Kickboxing as well. Has the chance to create history. And just this, you know, we talk about bangers this and bangers that. This is a bona fide banger between two scary lunatics, and I cannot wait to see how it all plays out. Before I share my thoughts on how the fight will go itself, the nuts and bolts of the fight, what's your thoughts on this fight as a complete whole without going into too much detail on how these guys match up?
It's what dreams are made of. Like, what more can I say?
Yes.
For the fighters, obviously it's important. Like, MSG is a big and heralded arena, right? I think it's more important for American fighters because of, you know, the sort of the history that it has in that country. But I think for these guys, especially for Alex Pereira, MSG is a pretty nice place to be. I think that the fight as a whole, as you say, it's two lunatics. Fair play to Alex Pereira going up, though I really don't think we're going to see. Well, I mean, one of the questions I have is about the size difference, right? Alex Pereira is obviously an absolutely huge middleweight, but is he a regular sized light heavyweight? Because Jiri Prochazka is an absolutely monstrously sized light heavyweight, and so I'm very interested to see what they stack up physically against each other, or how they stack up physically against each other. But both guys are, I think this is the other thing. The thing I love about this is both guys are individuals and they are unabashedly themselves. Alex Pereira, with his choice of garments when he walks to the weigh-ins, the Brazilian hats and the face paints and the this and the body paint and all this stuff. Jiri Prochazka with the samurai ethic and all of this sort of stuff. Like, just as two characters facing off in the MMA world, it's blockbuster. It's something that it's almost like a hearkening to old, which was when fighters were allowed sponsors and they were allowed to wear their own shorts and they really were allowed to display their characters. It really feels like a coming together of two characters. And I do think that lives, that brings sort of an element of rigor and size to the fight, you know? I do also have a massive question as to whether Jiri Prochazka is actually fully healthy and ready. We're going to find out.
That's a big thing. Let's get into it. Like, I mean, when I look at these two guys, two of the most favorite guys that I want to watch inside the UFC in terms of excitement, just, you know, guys that really got me out to the edge of my seat are guys, and not necessarily. Prochazka isn't really like this. Prochazka gets me off the edge of my seat with his exciting, unorthodox nature inside the cage. Pereira gets me at the edge of my seat because he's just a scary ass motherfucker, to be honest. I mean, I just look at him and it's like when you watch Brock Lesnar coming out to the cage or Chuck Liddell in his prime, you're nervous. You're nervous about what could happen inside of there because Pereira possesses such killer power, and Prochazka maybe not possesses the same level of power, but his level of unorthodox and the way he throws his shots makes him supremely dangerous on the feet. But you know, you kind of likened Kamaru Usman very excellently against Chimaev as calmness versus chaos, and I think we could see something similar in this fight. The questions that hang over everybody's head, and this is the question that you have, this is the question that I have. I would have sat here 1 year ago, Harry, and I would have said, and I probably did say on this, that I believe Jiri Prochazka is the best 205-pound fighter on the planet, and he would beat almost any 205-pounder given that mantle as well. Now, after coming off a serious injury, there are some doubts there. I mean, the level of activity of Alex Pereira is going to benefit him in this fight, I believe, and the level of inactivity from Jiri Prochazka, I believe, is going to affect him in this fight. So you're kind of dealt with a double-edged sword there, and it's going to be very interesting to see how both of these guys match up. Prochazka was in there with the trainer and coach of Alex Pereira in his last fight before he got hurt. Harry took out Glover Teixeira in a wild fight. Looking back at that fight, primarily was a grappling fight. I don't think we're going to see that unless Jiri Prochazka wants to kind of showcase those abilities in this fight. I think it was more forcefully done in Glover Teixeira, but in the Glover Teixeira fight. But I guess the question I have for you, if you're Alex Pereira, you're watching that fight, you're watching, you know, your coach and your mentor going in there against this guy. What are some of the takeaways that you feel he would have seen in that fight?
Jesus. I mean, Glover and Alex are obviously very, very different fighters. They approach different they're fighting differently. Jesus, I've just absolutely butchered that. I apologize. But what we're dealing with here is, if I'm Glover, I know that crisp boxing gets us into range and crisp boxing gets us out of range. We know that Jiri hits incredibly hard, right? We know that he can grapple. We know that he will absolutely not submit to anything, right? He's going to find a way to get out of everything. But I think for Glover coming in as a coach now and being able to relive that and maybe look at that from a different perspective, you know that the range play that Alex Pereira is going to be able to put in on this fight is going to dramatically change what the fight looks like, because he has the ability to punish Prochazka when Prochazka does Prochazka things. Now, there's obviously a potential that Prochazka just does Prochazka things and just
as well. Well, that could
go on.
That could work to his benefit or to his detriment. When I asked you what you think, Alex, what I seen watching it was, I feel that the winner of this fight is going to be the guy who control who's on the front foot, and Prochazka is going to want to be on the front foot. I believe from watching his fights, he's a much more dangerous fighter while he's fighting on the front foot rather than fighting with the reverse lights on. Would you agree with that?
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
the interesting thing for me with Prochazka is he likes fighting on the front foot for sure, but he also has no footwork patterns whatsoever. And so he kind of doesn't fight in the front foot either. Like, he fights in just vast spirals of wherever the fuck his body takes him. And maybe
I should have worded it. He's more maybe effective on the feet moving forward than maybe moving backwards. One thing else that I did see is that when he's not moving forwards, he does like to stand right in front of guys and just try and out-tough them. And I'm not sure whether that's going to be the right decision to make against a guy like Alex Pereira. And one big thing that I'm looking at Jiri Prochazka and his style here that I believe is going to be could be a massive thing in this fight, and that's his stance, Harry. And that's how, like, karate low stance that he'll stand like with this karate low stance in front of his opponents. And you're going to be doing that against, in my opinion, one of the best calf kickers inside of the UFC, and Alex Pereira, and the ability that man has to throw the calf kick with seemingly very little speed or strength, but massive impact when you land it. Ask Israel Adesanya how those leg kicks feel. And, you know, it was something that Israel cited after that fight, is that his ability to throw them at such close quarters without any tell at all, and how impactfully that they land. I think that's what Alex Pereira is going to have to attack here if he's going to win this fight. He's going to have to attack that lead leg. He's going to have to take away some of that movement from Prochazka, some of that explosiveness from Prochazka. And I think Prochazka's style really will feed into the calf kick of Alex Pereira, which I believe will start to open up more kind of avenues for him to get off some more attacks as this fight goes on. What do you think of that statement?
I couldn't agree more. One thing that we did see from Prochazka in the Glover Teixeira fight is that he was exhausted by the end of it. Exhausted. Now, a lot of that is because he had to gut out of submissions. He had to explode out of really poor grappling positions. I don't think we're going to see him put into those similar positions in this specific fight. Alex Pereira's grappling, obviously, as we know, is nowhere near the level of Glover Teixeira's. However, what I think is one of the major keys, as you say, is not just cutting at the leg, but it's going to be cutting at the leg and timing those low kicks when Prochazka is exploding into range. Because we know that Prochazka loves a spinning back fist. We know he loves a spinning kick. We know he loves a diverse, odd, angled, whatever the fuck he throws, right? And so Pereira is going to need to time those things, and he's going to need to punish them. I think your point on cool versus chaos is perfect. Fair play to me.
That's your point. That's not mine. I ain't taking any street or crap. It's just it's an analogy that I've been it's just sat with me, and it kind of followed me through into this fight as well, where it's more so calmness and chaos that you were kind of describing, maybe in terms of grappling with Khamzat. It's kind of in terms of striking here, an overall game with the composure of Pereira, who's going to keep everything tight and who's going to stay trucking away and landing those shots, and he's going to want to stay doing it for 5 rounds. And whilst he might not be able to create the scrambling sequences that Glover did to tire out Jiri Prochazka, there are other ways that you can tire out your opponent without grappling, and that's, you know, cutting off the cage. That's winning that outside foot battle and kind of dictating where this fight goes. It's winning the pressure battle here for Alex Pereira, and those are all things, like, I mean, we know how good a striker Israel Adesanya is, an exceptional elite level striker. At time, I believed Israel Adesanya was up there with the best strikers in the UFC at a time. Still probably is right now, just needs to get it out of himself. But I think Alex Pereira put him on the back foot, and I think if Alex Pereira can put Israel on the back foot, I believe he'll be able to do the same to Jiri Prochazka as well, which beggars the question, does Jiri Prochazka dust off his grappling in this fight? Does he try and take this into an area where he feels that he will have the advantage? You know, Jan Blachowicz tried to somewhat. He was only able to kind of get Alex Pereira up against the cage. But is there anything that you've seen in that fight between Alex Pereira and Jan Blachowicz that would make you think that there is any weaknesses in the takedown defense, or anywhere that Jiri Prochazka might be able to take advantage of heading in here to this title fight?
So I think the major difference, and this isn't going to be a technical response either, but I think the major difference is that Jiri Prochazka doesn't give a fuck in the same way that Jan Blachowicz does. Jan Blachowicz is a calculated, calm. He takes his chances. He builds everything up, and he's going to get to his takedown. And when he lands it, it's going to be great, right? It's going to be timed perfectly. It's going to be landed nice. He's going to get to the hips. He's going to do things technically. Prochazka's not going to do that. Like, he has no need to do that. And so I think that actually is, to me, the greatest route to victory for him against Pereira, is if he goes in and he's wild and he's, you know, just being crazy with the striking, it's likely that Pereira is going to have an answer for that, right? Pereira has seen wild and crazy striking before. The storied kickboxing background is going to have allowed him to see so many different looks on his come up.
That's a very good point. It was something that I was thinking about as well in watching. And it's kind of likened to the point I was making, and how uncomfortable that Pereira made things for Israel Adesanya, who is an exceptional. But like going back to Jiri Prochazka's unpredictable nature, unorthodox nature, Alex Pereira would have seen some level of that within Glory. Obviously, you have the wrinkle of the takedown attempts as well, and you know, it goes back to a point, Harry, that we maybe had made a couple of times on breakdown shows or on preview shows, is that sometimes you can show the takedown, but you don't necessarily have to commit to the takedown. You just need to get that thought into your opponent's head. And I'd be very curious to see if Jiri Prochazka can get that done in Alex Pereira. But to me, you know, we don't go too much into predictions here, but the more and more I think about this and the circumstances surrounding this fight, the more and more I think, you know, this is Alex Pereira's fight to lose in terms of styles. You know, styles make fights, and, you know, Prochazka is probably more well-rounded, but will he be lured into a straight striking fight by Pereira? He could be. You know, he's a wild man. He doesn't really like to take fights down, but, you know, strange things happen. You could eat one of those big left hooks, Harry, and you could completely change your life and change your view on the fight. So, I mean, who do you believe has the bigger advantage, and who do you believe you may see getting their arm raised at the end of this fight?
I don't fucking know, is the honest answer.
Tough one.
Okay, so the variables that are playing around in my head, right, is Prochazka fully recovered? We know that he throws wildly. What happens if he throws super wildly and the shoulder gets re-injured? What happens then, right? Because then we've basically got TJ Dillashaw versus Aljamain Sterling, and it's basically a misnomer, right? Is the size going to play a bigger advantage than I think? Because in my head, they're going to be a similar size. But what happens if Yuri's absolutely massive, right? What happens if, because we've seen Alex Pereira happy to sort of play on the back foot too. What happens if Prochazka is able to keep Pereira on the back foot, put him up against the fence, and starts to take him down? Do we see that Pereira's actually got really, really good takedown defense? Or are we going to, you know, in between now and the Amblahova performance, are we going to see that, you know, it's fucking... he's some novice and Yuri Prochazka just decimates him? I don't know. The big variable I have is, does Yuri Prochazka actually have a game plan? Like, does he have a game plan in the same way that Glover is going to be sitting and talking with Pereira, and together they're going to define a game plan that's going to put them in a position where they can effectively win a fight? Does Yuri Prochazka have the same ability to consume a game plan? Because he certainly doesn't fight like he does. He certainly seems like he goes out and he fights on instinct, and he fights on ability, and he fights on the skills that he's inherently got. But it doesn't feel like he's got somebody in his ear saying, right, first half of round one, we're going to do this, and then we're going to switch to this, and then we're going to switch to this, and then we're going to switch to this. Like, I just don't know. Like, I just don't know.
That's what makes it such a good fight. And, you know, you mentioned Glover and his input here. Like, how much of an advantage to Alex is it that Glover was in there and not so long ago against Yuri Prochazka, felt what he was like, felt his weaknesses, which I think most of his weaknesses lie in the grappling department, and I don't know whether Alex Pereira is going to be able to kind of take advantage of them. I'm really curious to see, and I hope this fight plays out on the feet, mainly because two really exceptional strikers with big power, and this fight it's one of these fights that is almost impossible that it won't deliver in some way, Harry, really, the way we're looking at it. So we never know. We don't know. The UFC has a knack of making a fool out of us the majority of the time with some of these fights and how they go. You know, talking about shoulder injuries as well, is that there's nothing saying Alex Pereira isn't going to start targeting that shoulder. Is he going to throw up some high kicks? Is he going to force Prochazka to block those kicks on his bad side? You know, listening to him talking about the shoulder injury, and the only thing I can compare Yuri Prochazka's shoulder injury to was that of Peter Queally, who suffered a bad shoulder injury a couple of fights back. And he came back and he fought, I believe, Patricio Pitbull, and then fought Benson Henderson, and didn't look himself at all. And it was only his last fight, he said he started to come right, and he said he had a very difficult time in coming back right from a shoulder injury. You think of the dexterity that you need in your shoulder for mixed martial arts. It's a tough ask, and it'll be very interesting. It's like typical UFC. You come back from a serious injury, you get thrown in there with an absolute killer like Pereira. Harry, finalize your thoughts with us on this fight before we move on.
The other thing I was just going to add, now that you've mentioned it, is what about the confidence in the shoulder? Like, one of the things that Yuri Prochazka has in his arsenal is this unrelenting ability to be unorthodox. If he doesn't trust that shoulder, how much does that take from his ability to throw wildly? How much, and I don't mean wildly as in, you know, I don't mean that negatively. I just mean whenever
the way he throws strikes. That's exactly what it is.
How does that come back? Like, it does that. Yeah. Has that forced him in this camp on the way back to be more technical? If so, what does that do for his performance? I just don't know. It's a fascinating fight. Fascinating.
Very, very fascinating fight, and I'm very excited to see all that go down. And I'm very excited for the next one as well. The co-main event, the heavyweights are in action. We mentioned it already. Sergei Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall for the interim title. This is a super interesting fight. Obviously, Aspinall taking this at short notice, as is Pavlovich. But the little wrinkle here that we must discuss is that Pavlovich was the backup fighter for Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic. And, you know, he would have been getting himself prepared for that. So, you know, when it comes to who's better prepared, it would probably be Sergei Pavlovich in this fight, as opposed to Tom Aspinall, who is a guy who generally keeps in shape any which way. But like we discussed, Harry, with the Alex Volkanovski Islam fight, you know, they're staying in shape and they're getting fight ready. They're two very different things. And that's the problem Tom Aspinall has heading into this fight with the Russian.
It is, but I think at heavyweight it is slightly different. Like, you know, I do think it is slightly different. Obviously, for Volkanovski, there's a weight issue. For Volkanovski, there is a far more reliance on a sharpness issue. I do think, you know, for Tom Aspinall, Sergei Pavlovich is a very fast man at heavyweight, hits like an absolute fucking Mack truck. And so, you know, there is going to be an element here where Tom Aspinall would have loved an 8-week camp or a 12-week camp or whatever it is. Obviously, he would have loved that. But in the same vein, and for Pavlovich, now just hear me out, right? Hear me out. If you're Sergei Pavlovich and you're thinking, okay, I'm preparing for Jon Jones or Stipe Miocic, you're preparing for a very well-rounded fighter. You are preparing for somebody that can do everything. Now, obviously, with Jon Jones, you're preparing for the range. For Stipe, you're preparing for the boxing, and all of these sorts of things. But Tom Aspinall isn't a stone's throw away from either of them, in that he is very, very well rounded. If Sergei Pavlovich had got a late notice replacement and it was Gelton Almeida, then that throws a lot of your camp out of the fucking window, right? Because he's going to fight completely differently. But I think this one sort of favors Sergei Pavlovich in that Tom Aspinall comes in. What do we know? We know he's fast. We know that he's got slick hands. Well, that's just Stipe Miocic. We know that he's got some grappling chops. Well, that's, both of them, but probably Jon Jones slightly more, sorry. And then we know he has submission offense. Well, we know that Jon Jones has got that. And we also know that Stipe can finish a submission if you put him in one. And so for Sergei, I don't think it's a vast stone's throw away from what he was preparing for. But to me, this fight is just as much you're sat on the edge of your seat type of fight as the main event is, because this is heavyweight. We know that both of these guys have got huge power in their hands. We know both of these guys are fast. We know they're athletic. We know that they can compete in all facets of the game. And so, Jesus, this is very, very much about as 50-50 in that whoever lands first is probably going to win this fight.
2017 was the last time that Sergei Pavlovich went to a decision, Harry. Is that something that, if you're Tom Aspinall, you're looking at in this fight, coming in and trying to play the long game and seeing, look at the fight game is a lot of, let's see what happens if, and I think if you're Tom Aspinall here, you've got to at least try get past round one. Once you get past round one, then you can start worrying about maybe getting past round two. Now, on a Tom Aspinall full camp, Sergei Pavlovich full camp, I think I would unquestionably go with Tom Aspinall here, but I'm not too sure how good his cardio is going to be coming in here, and if he is going to be able to play the long game with a guy like Sergei Pavlovich. I surely don't think that coming in here and getting into a brawl or a heavy boxing exchange with Sergei Pavlovich early days is the wisest move. So I guess my question is, if you're Tom Aspinall here, are you treading lightly in the early stages here and trying to bring Sergei Pavlovich into the later rounds where there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of questions? We mentioned 2017 was the last time that he fought to a unanimous decision and a win. Since then, it's been round one knockout, round one loss knockout to Alistair Overeem, another round one knockout, 2 round one knockouts, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 round knockout, round one knockouts, as I can barely speak. That's something that we need to look at here, and something that we've seen time and time again with these guys who are going and getting their opponents out of there inside round one. We don't know whether they have longevity in the effectiveness of their game that they're bringing in, and that's a question that Tom Aspinall is definitely going to have to ask Sergei Pavlovich on Saturday night.
I agree, and this is going to go one of two ways, in my opinion, if you're in the Tom Aspinall camp, because let's say he doesn't have the cardio. He's going to just chuck 5 minutes in here and see what the fuck happens, But I do feel like, Tom talks all the time about the circle of training partners that he has, the Field of Freezes and the this and the that. And he believes it's the best heavyweight talent pool that you can find, either not just in Europe, but in the world, right? And so when you're surrounded by that, it's one of those things that one or all of you are going to be preparing for some form of contest in the coming weeks at all times, right? If you've got 5 or 6 or 7 active heavyweight fighters, the likelihood is all of you are preparing, right? And so if you're in the gym and you're actively in camp with somebody else, then okay, you're not maybe doing the extra 2 rounds of cardio or the extra this or the extra that, but you're absolutely in some form of fight shape. Otherwise, you're of no use to the camp. And so I do think that Tom Aspinall will be coming in prepared cardio-wise, and I do think he had enough time to, if cardio was going to be the problem, you have enough time to really start smashing cardio to pieces and getting yourself in a better position than he would have been. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. I do agree with you entirely. I want to test the takedown defense of Sergei Pavlovich, because I don't think he's come up against anyone yet that's had an ability to hold him down and then keep him down. And so we will really see whether Pavlovich's takedown defense and his get-up game or his scramble game is up to par. Because we also have to think, right? Pavlovich throws everything with haymakers, and he's also a huge human. So how tired is he going to be if he has to get up consistently or he has to explode out of certain situations? And that's obviously what Tom Aspinall's looking to do, right? Take some pop out of those punches.
Yeah, Aspinall should look to do that from the get-go, or should he just kind of fight on the outside, maybe try, you know, we mentioned Sergei Pavlovich's speed, and his speed is quite good, but overall I think movement from Tom Aspinall is probably going to be quicker than the two. Maybe what would you think looking at both of these guys fighting? I would definitely have the speed advantage overall with Tom Aspinall, not just the speed of punches, but the rate of movement in and out of the pocket and footwork, etc., and things like that.
Definitely. I think he's a more agile human in his body. I think Pavlovich throws very, very, very fast with his hands.
Yeah.
For the power that's generated, right? The speed in his hands is crazy, but generally the movement of Tom Aspinall is far, far quicker, I think. And I think he has to use that to his advantage. If I was Tom Aspinall, I know it's playing with fire slightly, but I'll play on the outside and I'll look to pull a jab. I'll look to pull a right hand in the very same way that Jailton Almeida did to Derek Lewis. He looks to pull something from his opponent and then ducks underneath and tries to take the fight down. I don't think Tom wants to be marauding into naked shots, and I don't really think that's his style either. But he also needs to obviously tread the line very, very carefully, that he doesn't just get into immediate sort of pocket exchanges, which is what Pavlovich will probably be looking to do.
Indeed, yeah, it makes for a very, very interesting fight. And it's crazy to think, you know, the 23rd of July, 2022, 15 seconds in to his headline slot against Curtis Blades, Tom Aspinall grabs his knee and goes down to the canvas. Bad ACL injury. Probably wondering over the coming weeks if he's ever going to come back and fight. Will he ever be the same again? Comes back with a monstrous performance, almost a year to the day against Marcin Tybura, gets him out of there in round one and immediately finds himself into a title fight. MMA is one of the most craziest sports or craziest things out there, whatever you want to call it. And it's a credit to see Tom Aspinall there. It's great to see the future of the heavyweight division. Look, we lost John Jones and we lost Stipe Miocic, but that was a fight of two legends. What we're seeing in this fight is a battle between two of the hottest prospects in the heavyweight division and two guys that are going to be around. That is going to be around for quite some time. We shall move on to the next one. I'm really excited about that, but also excited to see how Mackenzie Dern, Harry, looks against fellow Brazilian Jessica Andrade, who keeps getting fed these young, hungry lions coming up in the division. How do you see this fight going down?
That's a very good question. Andrade has not looked herself, right? This is the third straight loss and the third. She's had 3 losses and 3 finishes. Right, 3 losses by finish. Apologies, I'm stumbling all over my words. If this is the time that Jessica Andrade is finally beginning to fall off a cliff, then we're going to see it, right? This matchup for Mackenzie Dern is kind of tailor-made in that she generally has barreled through the pocket. She has generally barreled through shots in order to get to her opponent, and that's caused her problems ad nauseum in previous fights. If she hasn't fixed those holes, then Jessica Andrade will just punish her the same way that she's punished everyone else. She still has haymakers, fantastic hooking ability, lots and lots of power. If Jessica Andrade has lost her ability to compete at the elite level, then Mackenzie Dern is going to be able to get inside. And if she does take her down and she does start attacking submissions, I mean, Erin Blanchfield is a fantastic grappler, but Mackenzie Dern is levels when it comes to straight grappling. And so if you're getting taken down and you're getting finished by an Erin Blanchfield on the ground is specifically where I mean, then absolutely I would expect Mackenzie Dern to be able to do a very similar thing if she takes Jessica Andrade down. So I think this is actually the perfect test for Mackenzie Dern, but it's also kind of the perfect fight for Jessica Andrade in that Andrade knows that there's not a huge amount of worry on the feet. Mackenzie Dern doesn't carry huge amounts of power, and we know that the striking has been her Achilles heel in her career thus far. But if Mackenzie Dern is able to walk through or navigate technically the Jessica Andrade barrages, then this is a fight for her to win without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, there's not too much more that I can add to that. I'd actually agree with everything that you said there. It's like, I think the key here is that lack of hunger from Jessica Andrade, Harry, in her last couple of fights is worrying to me. And I'm wondering if she's going to be able to find that hunger again and get back on the horse and try and get a win. 3 losses in a row for Andrade, Erin Blanchfield, Jan Xiaonan, and Yan Xiaonan, I should say, and Tatiana Suarez. And look at another killer in Mackenzie Dern here. There are holes in the game, as you said, but will Andrade be able to kind of get through and get to those holes and beat Mackenzie Dern? It'll be interesting to see. I'm excited for that one, to see if Mackenzie Dern can live up. Let's move on to the next one, a bona fide barn burner in the lightweight division. Matt Frevola versus Benoit Saint Denis. This fight is just simply going to deliver, Harry. 2 guys that like to come on, fight on the front foot, and this is going to be an absolute war. Look, we cited the fight of the night on the Sao Paulo card. I think we're looking at the fight of the night here. Look, bar any craziness in the co-main or the main event, this one has fight of the night written all over it.
Just an insane fight, top to bottom, absolutely insane fight. I think that if I was to try and break this down technically, I think Benoit Saint Denis is probably better in the grappling. And if he's smart, he should just try and use the grappling. I do feel like he will as well. Like, I'm sure there'll be some crazy mad exchanges, but Matt Frevola is absolutely just looking to steamroll fellas. And Benoit Saint Denis can do that and is happy to do that. But I would like to see Benoit Saint Denis, because I think Benoit Saint Denis has an interesting ceiling, right? Like, it's not
very good. I was keeping an eye on him. He came in as the UAE Warriors champion and undefeated, and obviously came in and fought Alessio Zaleski dos Santos at welterweight for his first fight. Referee almost killed him by not stopping that fight a little bit sooner. But since he's moved down to the lightweight division, Harry, Benoit Saint Denis has looked really good. And you've mentioned one thing about Angela Hill on the balance breakdown this week. You mentioned that Angela Hill likes to go out there and win fights in the most difficult manner possible, and she doesn't like to do things the easy way. And I think Benoit Saint Denis can have tendencies like that as well, where, you know, especially in his last fight against Thiago Moises, went out and absolutely had a war in round 1. You know, probably won the first round, but then decided in round 2, was like, actually, I'm technically better than this guy in a lot of areas, and decided to kind of take the fight down and landed some ground and pound to get Moises out of there. So I think the same here. I think Matt Frevola can draw Benoit Saint Denis into a kind of a scrap, or a kind of a little bit of a slugfest, and I think that's his best chance of winning this fight, if he can catch him in the pocket. But technically speaking, Benoit Saint Denis is better in all areas. I think he's better on the feet. I think he's certainly better in the grappling department. But it'll be interesting. We've kind of taken Matt Frevola's skills for taken him. Oh my goodness, I can't talk tonight. We've taken Matt Frevola's skills for granted at times before, where he's surprised us, and he could very well do the same here. But basically, what I've seen off previous fights, I think this is a fight for Benoit Saint Denis to win, and it should be a really exciting one. That being said, anything else to add on this one before we move on?
Not really, no. Frevola comes from a good camp. He's got a good team behind him. They're going to know, and they're going to try and prepare that man as well as possible. But I do think Frevola has a mindset, which is he's kind of a Drew Dober type, right? Where he wants to be in exciting fights, and he wants to take fights that are going to be exciting. I think he cares less about going out and winning fights via, you know, solid game plan, strategy, technical ability, whatever. He wants to be in exciting fights, and he's going to be in one.
Absolutely is. And speaking of exciting fights, we have another one that'll get us kicked off on the main card, and that's Pat Sabatini versus Diego Lopes, and his fantastic baronet of hair as well, it has to be said, coming in here to fight in the lightweight division. And this is another kind of a one, you know, Lopes coming in here was very impressive against Movsar Evelev. We talked him up very highly in that fight, which he lost by unanimous decision on short notice. Came out, and we were wondering, because we've seen this happen before with guys, Harry, you know, okay, you're taking it at short notice, you're living off the buzz of the short notice, you're not letting the occasion get to you, you perform well, you come into your second UFC fight, you don't perform as well, you're kind of down to standard. They gave him Gavin Tucker, they matched him up correctly, I believe. You know, you want to go up for Evelev, you want to come back down, get your bearings in the UFC, and I think we finally reached the correct point that a guy like Diego Lopes is, and a guy like Pat Sabatini, who was a very well-rounded, very solid grappler. good on technical and on the feet as well. And this is really good stylistic matchup for both guys to see where they're at. And it's hard to put your finger on who's going to get the win here.
I do think it's a tough matchup for Lopes in that you come in at Evloev and you perform brilliantly, as you've already stated, right? Comes in, Gavin Tucker, I agree, right matchmaking, fine, gets the win, no problem. Sabatini is a fair level up from Gavin Tucker. And so I like that the UFC are offering Lopes these fights, but it might turn out in a situation where Lopes is going to be like 2-2 in his first 4. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a good highlight of his skills. But I do think that the UFC is asking an interesting question in this fight, which is, if Lopes is just a solid grappler, right, and has some really, really good submissions, Pat Sabatini's not that man, right? Like, Pat Sabatini's not the guy that you're going to just be catching in subs and dominating on the ground. You're going to have to be a well-rounded fighter to beat Pat Sabatini. And so I'm very interested to see what Diego Lopes brings here. Now, look, he might make me eat humble pie, and he might dominate Pat Sabatini on the ground, and he might just submit him and go through him like butter like he did Gavin Tucker. But I just don't...
go through him like butter like you did with Gavin Tucker. I love it. I love it.
Not me, lads. That's me at 1:35 in the morning. Binging
fucking that legend. There you go.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's a tough fight for both men, but it's a banger though. It's a banger. Great fight.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that one as well. I mean, apart from the top 2 fights, you could be a little bit critical about the main card of the pay-per-view overall, but I'm not going to complain. I actually quite like the main card setup. I mean, if you've been paying attention, you're going to recognize a lot of those fighters on the undercard of the main card. So, you know, I am excited about that. It's the top 2 fights really sell this pay-per-view on its own anyway, but we shall take a very quick look at the prelim section of this card, Harry. Steve Erceg is coming back after his great win at UFC in Vancouver. He takes on Alexandra Costa. I know you're looking forward to that one. Tabitha Ricci taking on Lupitina Gomez, another great fight on the undercard as well. Nazim Sadikov takes on Vladyashev Borshev's Slava Claus. That's a cracker as well. Jared Gordon versus Mark Madsen. The gift that keeps on giving is this undercard. Young Ho Kang takes on Jan Castaneda. Joshua Van versus Kevin Borjas. And Dennis Bazooka versus Jamel Emmers will be your first fight on the card. We will break down all of those fights in great detail on the balance breakdown, but I'm going to hand it over to Harry first, just for a quick run through or any standout fights that you may be looking forward to on the card, Harry.
I love Mia Lupa Godinez fight. Really interested in this specific fight. Tabitha Ricci, another surging prospect. This one I think is whoever wins this gets a big push in the 115 pound division, and so I'm grand for that. Really happy to see Steve Erceg back too, and in the correct slot for Steve Erceg to be in. I think he's a really interesting player in this 125 pound division. He hasn't been given a nice out against Alessandro Costa. I think so. Got some nasty power on him, but if Steve Erceg is the fighter that we think he is, then he'll go through Costa no problem. But yeah, I mean, Jared Gordon, Mark Madsen's also like a low-key banger. That should be a
very interesting fight. Yeah, very interesting
one. But I like Sadikov versus Borshev. I think that's going to be a flames matchup. No problem with any of this.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty solid card overall. Definitely looking forward to seeing it. Definitely looking forward to breaking it down with you, sir, on the balance breakdown next Tuesday. And that's exactly what we'll do. That's another preview show in the books. UFC 295. Jiri Prochazka, Alex Pereira will fight to see who is the next light heavyweight champion. Sergei Pavlovich, Tom Aspinall is your co-main event to find out who will become the interim champion, or maybe, if some people want to call it, the next big thing in the heavyweight division. Let John Jones, I don't know, I think with John Jones and Stipe, you create like a bullshit title like the WBC do, and you actually give the big title to Sergei or Aspinall, and you let the boys fight. Like, fuck the belts. Just let's watch John Jones and Stipe go at it for just the shits and giggles. Do we need fights? Do we need this? The UFC will want it for marketing reasons. John Jones and Stipe probably wants it for history. But look, we're watching the future of the heavyweight division in the co-main event at UFC 295. I'm really excited to watch it. Really excited to break it down. As I said, BJJ _ Harry Powell is where you'll find that man over there. Go and follow him. If you want to leg lock somebody, you need to go and check out that guy's Instagram right now. You'll be going around ankle picking and leg locking every motherfucker that runs in your way or causes you some ire. O'Neill MMA is where you'll catch me. We'll be back very soon. Enjoy the fights this weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.